Welcome back to Movie Recap. Today I'm gonna show you a 2008 adventure drama film called Australia. Spoilers ahead. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. The movie starts with Nulla's story, an Aboriginal young boy. He shares that while he is catching fish, he sees white fellas guiding the cattle across the river to Carney land. King George holds Nulla's spear and tells him to make himself invisible and hides. All of a sudden, a dead man that has an arrowhead on his chest falls into the water. Nulla rides the horse to faraway downs. When he arrives home, he sees a car coming and thinks that they are the coppers who will bring him to the Mission Island, a place where mixed bloods like him are training to become servants of the white fellas, so hurriedly runs and hides in the water tank. He peeks in a tiny hole and realizes that they aren't white fellas after seeing Lady Sarah Ashley of England, the strangest woman he has ever seen. He mentions that it doesn't start on that day, it begins a little while ago in a faraway land called England. Lady Sarah Ashley of England wants her husband to see the faraway downs, but he doesn't like it because the offer of Mr. Carney, the cattle king who wants to buy it, is very low compared to its worth. Sarah thinks that her husband is busy with women, and not cows, so she decides to go to Australia to sell the cattle station, and bring her husband home despite her husband's objection. Her husband writes a letter that he cannot meet her because of his busy schedule, so he just sends his trusted man nicknamed the Drover. In a pub, the Drover is being teased by a drunk man, and says that he doesn't belong there because he hangs out with black people. Magary, the Drover's main man, asks the Drover to just let it pass because Sarah's plane is coming, but he refuses, and just commands him to wave his hat if he sees her. Then he starts to fight with the men in the bar. Mr. Carney, owner of a lot of cattle stations, worries that Lady Sarah and her husband will be his competitor in supplying meat in the army. That's why he is eager to buy the faraway downs. A man named Neil Fletcher tells him to relax because he already prepared something for Sarah that will make her leave their place right away. Sarah enters the bar and looks for the Drover without realizing that he is at her back fighting with a lot of men. When she goes out, she is very surprised to see that her luggage flies open, scattering her undergarments all over the place. The Drover successfully knocks down all his opponents and picks up Sarah's undergarments. The Drover takes Sarah to faraway downs using his big truck, which is loaded with a lot of things. She doesn't feel comfortable because the truck looks disgusting. Margary and his cousin come along with them too. Lady Sarah is amazed upon seeing kangaroos for the first time when all of a sudden, Margary's cousin shoots the kangaroo and loads it on the top of the truck. Sarah is speechless as she stares at the blood stains on the windshield. The next morning, a woman with a truck being pulled by camels arrives and pushes off a drunk man named Kipling Flynn out of her truck to ride the Drover's truck. The Drover tells Sarah that he is her accountant. An Aboriginal girl runs and greets Drover on the side of the truck. She asks if the Drover would like to stop by for a while, but he responds that he needs to deliver things first, then asks for a kiss and bids goodbye. Sarah tells the Drover that he and her husband share the same interest. The Drover thinks that Sarah is referring to breeding animals, then the two get into an argument for Sarah assumes that the Drover exploits Australian women, and would like to make her as one of his victims. The Drover gets offended, and exclaims that he will not choose Sarah even if she's the only woman left in Australia. They finally arrive in faraway downs. It seems like something's off, so the Drover gets out of the truck, and tells Sarah not to go down, but she still gets out of the truck, and goes inside the house despite the Drover's restraint. Upon entering the house, she sees women crying. She enters a room, and finds the body of her dead husband lying on the table beside Fletcher. Fletcher gives his final speech at the funeral of Sarah's husband. He says that his family has been serving the owners of the faraway downs for 3 generations. That's why they know how hard the land can be, but Sarah's husband never gave up. He also adds that the murderous black King George is the one who kills her husband. That night, Nulla sings a song for Sarah. She cannot sleep, so she goes outside to find where the song is coming from, but doesn't find anything, so she goes back to her room. She's very surprised upon seeing Nulla inside. He introduces himself, and tells Sarah that he finds her husband nice, so he brings him to the Billabong to show him the big bulls. Sarah then realizes that it was the place where her husband was killed. The next morning, Nulla reminds Sarah about Billabong, but is interrupted when Fletcher arrives. Nulla, at the back of Fletcher, points to the direction of Billabong. Sarah curiously asks Fletcher about Billabong. He responds that their cattle don't cross that river because that is Carney's property. Sarah tells Fletcher that Nulla is the one who told her the story, so he calls Nulla, and whispers that he will beat his mother if he will speak a word. Nulla's mother goes out very scared, and tells that her son might have mistaken Carney's cow for their cow. When they are about to leave, Nulla goes up to the windmill, and shouts that Fletcher is a liar. Nulla successfully makes the windmill work. That surprised all of them because Fletcher says that it has not worked for years. Fletcher runs after Nulla, then hits him as well as his mother and grandmother, for they try to interfere. Sarah tries to stop Fletcher by smacking him with a riding crop, then fires him. Fletcher threatens her that he will leave with his men, and no one will be in charge of her land, but Sarah's decision is final. He asks Flynn to go with him, but he decides to stay with Sarah. Sarah wonders why Fletcher blocked the water pump, so she goes to Flynn's room and demands for the truth. Flynn shows her a ledger that contains information about the bankruptcy of their company. However, he shows another ledger that has the lists of the unbranded fat cows that Carney steals. Sarah also realizes that Nulla is Fletcher's son. She wants to go to the authorities to inform them of the truth, but Flynn warns him that Carney is the authority, so he suggests to her to follow her husband's plan, to sell the cows to the army to break Carney's monopoly, use the profits to help faraway Downs to recover, then go back to London and live peacefully. The drover arrives with a herd of wild horses. Sarah tells the drover that he fired Fletcher together with his men. At first, he gets angry, but eventually calms down after knowing that Fletcher connives with Carney to steal thousands of their best cattle. Sarah makes a deal with Drover. If he will help her, she will give her Capricornia, her husband's thoroughbred horse. At first, they are very concerned because they need at least 7 people to manage the cattle, and there are only 3 of them, the drover, Magary and his cousin. Eventually, Sarah, Nulla's mother and grandmother, join the group that makes it almost complete. As they prepare to leave, police arrive. Nulla and his mother hide in the water tank. The police officer sympathizes with Sarah, and tells her that they will do their best to find King George, who they assumed was the one who killed her husband. A man who is with the police officer, uses the faucet to cool down. As a result, the water tank fills up. Nulla tries to ask for help, but her mother stops him because she doesn't want her son to be caught. The police officer tells Sarah that Fletcher informs him that there is an Aboriginal child in Sarah's land. Sarah just answers that she will surely look out for him. When the police leave, Sarah hurriedly informs the drover that Nulla and his mother are in the tank. He hurriedly gets up to it, but unfortunately, Nulla's mother is already dead. Sarah tries to comfort Nulla by telling her the story of the Wizard of Oz. She then sings the song, Somewhere Over the Rainbow. Even if she isn't good at singing, Nulla likes the song. It brings back his courage and determination in helping Sarah get the fat cattle into the metal ship. The next day, Sarah, the drover, Nulla's grandmother, Flynn, Magary and his cousin, and the cook start their journey and bringing the cattle to Darwin. Back in town, Carney encourages the captain to sign the contract that will allow them to supply beef to the army, but the captain refuses to sign it right away because he receives news from the Air Force that they spotted a big mob of cattle crossing the Marmont River. They think that someone must be helping Sarah, so they should act fast, so they do not get that far. Sarah hears a chanting. The drover informs her that Magary and his cousin are singing to calm the cattle, so she needs to learn it because she must sing during his shift. The drover gives each of them a schedule to watch the cattle, but Sarah opposes the idea of Nulla working. The drover informs her that when he was at his age, he was already manning an outstation, and reminds Sarah the rules that everyone should follow his orders. Nulla tells Flynn that Sarah's husband was killed by a glass-tipped spear. Suddenly, Fletcher and his team pour gasoline on the brush, then light a match that results in fire. The cattle are very afraid, which resulted in a stampede. Everyone wakes up, and tries to round the cattle back to the canyon. Flynn and Nulla are the closest to the front, so they try to stop the cattle, but Flynn's horse breaks a leg, making him fall towards the ground. Nulla tries to help him, but the cattle already trample on Flynn. Flynn is already at the edge of the cliff. He focuses and looks directly to the eyes of the cattle, then sings a chant together with King George. Magically, the cattle stop. Nulla loses consciousness, but Sarah catches him. The drover goes to Flynn, who is very hurt. Before he dies, he gives the drover his harmonica, and then confesses that Nulla tells him the secret behind Sarah's husband's death. After that, he dies. The drover talks to Sarah that the last thing Flynn told him before he died was that her husband was killed by a glass-tipped spear, and assumes that Fletcher is trying to put the blame on King George, but he doesn't have proof yet. They decide to continue their journey to Darwin. Later that night, they get Flynn's rum and give a toast for him. The cook sings and plays a guitar, so Sarah asks the drover to dance under the tree. They look at each other, and eventually share a kiss, but are interrupted by Nulla, who is at the top of the tree. The drover shares that he used to be married, but his wife died with TB. That time, the hospitals wouldn't treat because she was black. Then Sarah shares that she cannot bear a child. The two build a romantic relationship. The next day, they go across a very dry place. They see a small pond with water, but it is already poisoned. Margery says that the nearest place with water is a 3-day ride, but they need to cross Kuraman, but it is very dangerous. Suddenly, Nulla informs them that King George is there to help them. King George guides them to a place with water where 5 rivers meet. It is a very tough journey. Back at Darwin, the women at the salon read the headlines that Sarah and his team died in the Kuraman. Carney pressures the army leader to sign the contract because they don't have any competitors to wait for. All of a sudden, the place starts to rumble, then a whole herd comes running on the street. Sarah introduces herself, and says that they are there to deliver 1,500 of premium cattle, and offers a 20% discount to the army leader, but Carney says that it is too late because the contract is already signed. The army leader answers that the contract isn't valid until the cattle are loaded, so he hurriedly orders Fletcher to load the cattle to the ship right away. The drover and his team try to load their cattle before Carney's. Luckily, it is a success. The next day, Sarah asks the drover to go with her. She also tells him that she would like to continue her late husband's plan to bring back the life of Faraway Downs, and she would like to be the manager, but it seems like he doesn't agree to any of Sarah's ideas. At the ball, Sarah meets the doctor who runs, and expresses her desires of adopting Nulla, but he opposes. Since it is Sarah's first time in the place, her first dance is being auctioned off, and Carney wins the bidding. He tries to convince her to sell the Faraway Downs to him, and he promises to take care of the people there including Nulla. When Sarah is about to agree, she sees the drover, all dressed up, in the front door that makes her very excited, then bravely tells Carney that the Faraway Downs is no longer for sale. The life at Faraway Downs is back. All of them are living happily until one day, Fletcher visits Sarah, and tells Sarah that Carney died in an alligator attack, but the truth is he pushes Carney into the waters, then the alligator attacks him. Fletcher is now married with Carney's daughter. He convinces Sarah to sell the land to him, and he promises to help her in adopting Nulla. Sarah threatens him that she will tell his wife that Nulla is his son, but Fletcher threatens her back with the spear, same with the spear that killed her husband. Sarah and the drover argue on what to do with Nulla. Sarah wants him to stay, but the drover says that they should let Nulla choose his own path. The next day, King George goes to see Nulla, and tells him that it is time to go, but Sarah stops them. One day, Sarah panics because she cannot find Nulla. She prepares to find him, but the drover tries to convince her to let Nulla on his journey. The two argue, and decide to part ways. Unfortunately, Nulla is captured by the police, and put King George to prison. One day, Sarah goes to town, and finds out that Nulla is about to go to Mission Island. Sarah tries to stop it, but she fails, then promises Nulla that she will find him. Nulla stays in Mission Island, and Sarah works at the radio station while the drover continues his own journey. He sees a mob of army men, and worries about his loved one, so he decides to go back to the city. Unfortunately, Mission Island and Darwin are attacked by the Japanese. The drover arrives, and is surprised that the whole town is covered with fire. He looks for Sarah, but doesn't find her. Meanwhile, in a hospital, soldiers carry a body to the morgue, and tell them that the name of the person is Sarah Ashley, but the truth is it is Kath Fletcher, the wife of Fletcher. The drover finds out that Sarah and Nulla are in Mission Island, so they hurriedly go there. Luckily, he finds Nulla together with other Aboriginal children. The Japanese army arrives, so they hurriedly go to the boat, but Margery is left behind, and killed by the Japanese. In the morning, Sarah is hesitant to leave. She suddenly hears a harmonica playing. It is Nulla. Sarah runs towards the dock, and sees Nulla and the drover. Finally, the three reunite. Fletcher sees everything and shoots Nulla. Fortunately, King George throws a spear at him that kills him. The family goes back to Faraway Downs. Sarah sees King George sending a signal to Nulla, then allows him to go with his grandfather to continue their journey. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more videos like this to help the channel out. Have a nice day.